All right, so this course right now is the actual the logical occurrence after monologue, which is a person. And monologue, even when it's monologue, is really dialogue. It's a character speaking to himself, speaking to God, speaking to the crowd. There's different people they're actually speaking to. That's a dialogue. But the monologue is normally one person. A soliloquy goes back to Shakespeare, or a monologue, one character telling us about this world. Now, a character, we have to define what the character is. And the way you define a character is in a lot of ways how you define yourself. When I said the exercise of introduce yourself, hi, I'm Rick and I'm a writer, or hi, I'm Rick and I'm a writer. Why are you a writer? Well, I started, and you start to break down how the logic of a character explain themselves, because everyone actually wants to explain themselves. It's one of the greatest things people do. And a lot of times, if you listen, which is so important, that's why the exercise of sitting in a coffee shop and simply writing down what you hear people say will give you the ideas in a scene of how people talk. It's dialogue. So character is characters tend to be interesting, tend to be people that we see or get to know, or even in their blandness, they're interesting. In their stupidity, they're interesting. They're always interesting because if you actually take a look at anyone, they become interesting. Case in point, today, I'm in Chicago right now because I'm working on a screenplay. And I flew to Chicago. And when people say, what's this scene about? One is I start to listen, I start to see my world around me. I'm aware of my world. So in Chicago, three scenes happened. I was on the plane and this woman was getting sick. I could tell seemed a little pale. She had come out of surgery, her legs were bandaged up, and she was in the first class section waiting to use the restroom. And I was actually ahead of her. And I noticed how sick she was, and I was like, "Hey, do you need to go inside the bathroom? Please step ahead of me. Don't. I'm fine. You want to go to the restroom? No, I'm feeling nauseous. I had surgery last week, and I think that's probably why." And I said, "Okay, are you have low blood sugar?" And she goes, "Yes, I also have low blood sugar." And I said, "Well, perhaps we can have some orange juice." And I had the flight attendant bring her orange juice. And she said, "Should I sit down?" Yes, sit down. She sat down. Now, if you're in perspective or perception is her point of view, how she feels. Perspective is looking outside the scene and seeing what you're seeing. You're seeing me talking to this woman who's having a problem and giving her. And in fact, it became so fascinating. The stewardess, they're like, "Oh, thank you, doctor, for helping her." I'm not a doctor in anything. And I thought it was kind of ironic, there's comedy, that she thought I was a doctor. I'm not. I just happen to have gone through a lot of brain surgeries and I happen to know a lot of doctors. And there's certain things I could check off in a list of what someone's going through if they're sick. And that gives this point of what you need as a writer is compassion, empathy, where you see yourself in the shoes of the other person. That's that mirror neuron we talked about earlier. Empathy. So to have empathy, you're looking at the world, you start to see people from your perspective and see what their perception or how they're feeling in the first person. And once you engage with that person and they speak back to you, it's two people speaking on stage, and that is a scene. Now, later on, as we teach screenwriting as part of this, there's something like 100 scenes in a screenplay, and they did an average, and they found out each scene's about a page. And it varies from genre. So horrors are less pages than historical dramas. And they have AI that'll actually take apart everything and look at it and put it into chunks. And part of what I want to teach you is just to look at story and a screenplay as what you're building. So we're building, and we have monologue, one person in dialogue with the audience and to himself and to his muse. And then second, a scene, two people or three people or four, depending, having dialogue between them. And the characters that are also very unique and important want to be understood. Every person in stage or on the page wants to be understood. We have a deep desire to be understood. That's why people confess. That's why people will tell you their deepest, darkest secrets, because honestly, we are dealing with the great thought of, are we alone? And mankind is a community, and humankind is basically a part of a community. That's how we live. We live in community. And community is telling stories. And community is scenes. So if we look at this scene, a scene is always a dialogue. Truthful, it's honest, it's vulnerable, it's brave, it's dialogue between two characters in a scene. And those two characters happen to want something very important, an objective. What do two people want? You see a man and woman on stage, love, fear, all these different things are going in. The man wants this woman to love him. That's his objective. What's the obstacle? The obstacle is she lives 1,000 miles away. Is he willing to travel? And he has an objective, the obstacle, but 1,000 miles away, not a problem. In a jet, in a plane, it's a problem if you're on foot crossing a mountain range. It's a problem if you're on foot and people are trying to stop you and kill you. It's a problem if all these things are put on, and that's the problem. That's the conflict. And the stronger the obstacle needs to be a strong objective. So strong objective, wanting something really badly, and an obstacle stopping you is part of what is inherently in a scene. Two people, one person wants something, one person can't get it. Objective, obstacle. What do you want? What is keeping you from what you want? What do you want? What is keeping you from what you want? And normally what you want is something large. It's something emotional. It's something greater than yourself. You need to go on a journey. Now, what I want to do is always fill you with confidence. And simple as this is that you see great scenes every single day of your life. You just haven't written them down. And going back to the exercise of being in a room where you're listening to someone and you're writing it down is dialogue. And you'll find that sometimes the best dialogue is made up from a person. They're not realizing someone's writing this down. So it's very pure dialogue and that's, as we approach it as a writer, is what you want. You want to be able, through your taste, to understand what bad dialogue is. What's not sounding right, what's not sounding human, it's not sounding all the things, because human dialogue isn't perfect necessarily. Human dialogue just wants something really bad, and they're going to talk you into it. So when we talk about scenes between two people, what's their objective and what do they want? Now, case in point, I come to Chicago. I had that experience with the woman going through having compassion that she's getting sick. And that's a scene. Stewardesses are watching me. Flight attendants are watching. They're I'm dating myself. Flight attendants are watching, and they're seeing compassion, and they're fascinated by it. They're drawn to this drama, 30,000 feet in the air. I get on down and land in Chicago. Immediately in Chicago, I pick up my luggage. A man walks up to me. Excuse me, sir. I speak little bit English. You help me speak. You no understand. I hungry, no eat. I cold, no cold. Will you give me food? Rudimentary English, And so I thought to myself, yeah, I'll give you food. I'll get you a sandwich. And I'm talking to him in Spanish, get you a sandwich. And he starts to tell me that he's from Venezuela. Venezuela. Shipped out here from Venezuela by Governor Abbott in Texas into 39-degree weather, dropping to a 0 at night. No coat. He has a broken hand. He shows it to me. And so he can't work. At least he can't provide for himself to work. Oddly, When we talk about what was the first sign of civilization, seeing a femur bone that had been broken, that had healed. Someone took care of that person. And here in our modern world, I was taking care of this man who had a broken bone. And what a story that is. Look at that story. And here's the beauty about stories or scenes. They come to you if you listen. Following that story, I go to the hotel. I check on in the hotel. I see a woman. She's working the front desk, and she has an accent. And I said, "Excuse me, where's that accent from?" Out of curiosity, I know I've heard that accent. Is that Russian or Ukrainian? She goes, "Not Russian, not Russian at all. Ukrainian." And I go, "Slava Ukraine, of course." Sorry, I understand why we don't want to be mistaken as Russian. You're Ukrainian. And I said, just out of curiosity, have you known anyone that went through the war? And he goes, "Yes, I left Ukraine. I worked in the travel industry and working in the travel industry. No one's traveling to Ukraine. Didn't have a job. Came to America. My son's still there. He's 28. I said, "Are you worried about him going to the war?" She goes, "No, he's an engineer, so they need him in a different position. But his friend went to war." She takes out a picture of her friend on her phone. She goes, "Look at this. It's a picture of a young man. He's lost an arm. He's lost a leg. 28 years old, sitting on a hospital bed, coming back from the war." Three stories that all I had to do was listen, observe, and write. I made none of those stories up, but three great stories came to me. A woman sick on a plane who'd gone through surgery, compassion, seeing that. Not in first class, going to first class, telling it's okay, doesn't matter. When you're sick, doesn't matter if it's first class or economy, we're going to get you well. Then when the Venezuelan who's poor and broke, I went and bought him a sandwich. And when buying a sandwich, a Mexican woman there at this place says, "No, he can't be here asking for food. You can't." And she spoke to him in rapid Spanish. "You can't be here asking food." There's a little argument going on, all that. And I said, "It's okay. It's okay. I can afford a sandwich. He's just asking for." "No, it's okay. Let me give him a sandwich. Let God decide if he's being conning me or doesn't need it or any of those things. I see a man who's hungry, and worse than if I didn't respond." Do you see the drama, the conflict in those stories? These are all stories that I did not make up. They happened to me. And you will run into stories that happen to you. And the dialogue, now put yourself out of it, is perspective. What are you hearing? If someone was watching that story, they would be watching me dressed, buying a man who looks obviously poor, who's cold, in Chicago. What's the story there? What's the circumstance? Why is this happening? What's his objective? His objective is to eat. His objective is cold. His objective is to find a place. And I asked him, "Why did you come to America?" "Oh, Venezuela, no good. Venezuela, no good. No, 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 it's no good. I had to come to America." And I thought to myself, here's a woman who's Mexican with an obvious accent, who also probably did the same journey, angry that he's asking for food and telling me not to feed him. Drama, conflict, irony, all in a scene that I did not write. So when it comes to scenes, I want you to learn to simply listen. Sometimes it's not hard to write. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you listen for the story. A lot of times as a writer, I would say, I'm not a writer, I'm a scribe. I hear a voice, I see a scene, and I write it down. So let that take a certain amount of pressure off you and give you confidence that those scenes that are meant for you to hear will happen. And you have all of your entire life have heard scenes and repeated them and seen them. You've heard great dialogue. You've watched scenes. All you have to do is listen. And that's inspiration. Inspire. Breath. creativity, inspiration. Allow the stories to happen to you. When you tense up and, oh, I got to have a story, I got to have a story, I got to think about a story, I got to think of a story. Stories don't come. When you relax, when you listen, you may hear a story. Write it down. And that is a scene. Monologue, two people scene, and you have to put maybe 100 scenes together that makes a screenplay, or so many screens together to make a play, so many scenes together that make a book. It is possible to write. You have to have a desire to write. And using this, you have to listen. Let the story come to you. Look, in one day, I had 3 stories that each one could have been a screenplay. Each one could have been answered in a different way. And I'll tell you this, I'm not that special. It could have been you. Or you could have just watched and write down what you heard. And that's a scene. And you start to build the scenes. So we go from monologue, then we go to dialogue, and then we go to character, and then we have a scene. And those are the building blocks of what story is. So it's not so difficult. It's sometimes very easy. And sometimes it comes to you quickly. And luckily, it's like lightning. It strikes. So go out and write a scene.